What's up, y'all? It's Dr. Paul with Liberty Hill Comics, where I share my passion and over 40 years of experience comic book collecting, investing, and conservation with you. Today, we're continuing this conservation project for this copy of Flash number 139, the first appearance of the Reverse Flash from September 1963, written by John Broome with pencils by Carmine Infantino. This is a big Silver Age key from the Flash's Rogues Gallery. This copy belongs to a friend of the channel. In episode 1, we did a complete walkthrough and assessment of this book and came up with a conservation game plan. In episode 2, we disassembled the book, dry cleaned it, and prepared for wet cleaning. In episode 3, we completed all of our wet work for this cover: aqueous cleaning, deacidification, and resizing baths, as well as tear seals with Japanese paper and wheat paste. While the deacidification, resizing, and tear seals were effective, unfortunately we had some significant ink loss on the cover. If you want to watch any of those videos before you watch this one, follow the link over to the playlist I've created. Today, we're moving on to the interior pages because every single page needs tear seals, which I prefer to do with the entire page wetted. So we're going to clean and deacidify each wrap as we go. I'm going to demonstrate the method I use on one page today. And if you've seen me do this before, you will want to stick around because I've come up with a few innovations that make this process quicker, easier, and provide better results with fewer risks. And I'm going to share those with you today. But before we get to our main topic, I want to remind everyone that we are closing in on our goal of 1,000 subscribers. And in appreciation of subscribers new and old, I'm giving away this copy of Star Wars number 1 in CGC 7.5 with white pages. This is the first appearance of Luke, Leia, Vader, R2, 3PO, and a host of others, as well as the first cover appearance of Obi-Wan and Han Solo. It was published 6 weeks before A New Hope opened in theaters in 1977. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel and follow the link over to that video to comment there for a chance to win. I'm always studying the peer-reviewed paper conservation literature to find materials and methods I can apply to comic book conservation and bring to you through the channel. I just finished reading the second edition of Paper and Water by Gerhard Banach and Irene Bruckel. At 634 pages, it's a treasure trove of information for paper conservators. If you watched my last video, you know I just implemented a few changes for submersion baths. While I was experimenting with different methods for full immersion, I have also been trying different tools and techniques for the method of wet cleaning on my hobby mat that I usually use for a quick deacidification and cleaning when I don't want to do a full submersion bath for one reason or another. I took the advice of the authors and put my page in the humidity chamber for 2 hours prior to starting my cleaning and mending today. In the past, you've seen me take a considerable amount of time setting up my page on my hobby mat and getting it billiards table flat and smooth in the Hollytech sandwich. Today, I'm going to show you how I get the same outcome in a fraction of the time with less risk in damaging the paper and with fewer instances of stubborn wrinkles in the pages that I would sometimes experience with my previous method. You've just seen me clean my hobby mat with water in preparation for our wet cleaning today, and then lay down a piece of Hollytex. The Hollytex is, of course, non-woven polyester fabric, and I sprayed it with a little bit of 25% saturated calcium hydroxide solution. The Hollytex is very wettable, and so it wicks that solution readily and wets nicely. In contrast, our paper here is sized, and so it actually has a hydrophobic coating, and it's going to resist water entering, and that's why it takes some amount of time for it to start absorbing water here. So the Hollytex is going to assist us in getting water right up against that surface. We're repairing this blowout staple hole today, where the staple's been pulled all the way through. And I had a small flap of paper. You want to make sure that that's nice and flat, which is what I'm doing here. Now the surface you're seeing there is the actual centerfold. That's where you would see, as you're reading the comic, the staple arms. We want to do our repair on the other side, so I flipped the page over. Now, I didn't need to do that. I did that to just demonstrate to you the orientation of this page. So the image on the right is the image you would see as you're reading the comic immediately before the centerfold, and the image on the left is what you would see immediately after the centerfold. So as I was saying, what the Hollytext is going to do, it's going to wick the water solution right up against the paper, and it's going to assist in getting the paper wetted quickly and uniformly. And that's important for successful wet cleaning. You want to get the aqueous solution quickly into the paper, let it do its work, and then quickly get it out. The longer it stays in there, the more likely you are to get faded ink, bleeding ink, or other problems with your paper. So I'm trying to get a very smooth, very flat surface here with the paper uniformly absorbing the aqueous solution. You saw me spray it over, and then I walk away for 10 minutes. Then I come back, and you can see the paper's absorbed the water, but it's got some cockling, some wrinkling to it. So here's what I do. I pick up both layers of Hollytext, and what I want to do is I want to make sure the paper sticks to the top layer. I'm going to place the bottom layer back down on the hobby mat, and then lift the paper and the top Hollytext, and then I have a plastic squeegee here. This is an inexpensive squeegee. I'll put a link in my Amazon affiliates list in the description so you can use the same one I'm using. But look how easily I removed all the wrinkles and air bubbles. Now that water is associated directly with the paper, it's absorbed nicely into the paper, and I'll just drive any air bubbles or really small wrinkles out the other side. Sometimes I find I have to lift both sides, like you saw me lift on the left. Sometimes I only have to lift the left. Now, what I do is I let that water set in the paper for about 10 minutes. Now I'm going to come back and I'm going to remove the bulk of the water with the squeegee. You see I'm driving the water out. It's going to a line on the left. I'm wiping the squeegee in between each pass that I make. And the reason why I'm doing this is because the water's been in there. It's lifted out contaminants and tanning. It's leaving behind an alkaline reserve because it is a deacidification wash. And now it's time to start removing it. I like my page to be saturated when I do my tear seals and paper mending, but I don't want it so wet that it can't absorb. In this case, we're going to be using methyl cellulose, that it can't absorb the methyl cellulose, which is a glue essentially. And if it's too wet, that glue will just sit on top and it won't do its job in terms of adhering to both the Japanese paper and the page. So I want it sort of just the right wetness. It should be wet, but not sort of like when a sponge is wet, but it's not completely soaked through with water, right? I think everybody understands that's used a sponge. You can have a sponge completely wet all the way through, but it isn't saturated. You could pour another ounce of water and it would soak it up. That's kind of how we want the paper. Here's my methyl cellulose. Again, this is Lineco archival methyl cellulose. I prepare it per the manufacturer's instructions. There's a link in the description to get it from Amazon. My trusty number 5 sable brush that I prefer for doing this. Here's my Tengujo. Unfortunately, not a supplier on Amazon for this. I get it from Talus. This is the 5 grams per square meter, so it's kind of the medium thickness / weight. Tengujo. I find this is good for comic book work. It's strong enough yet dries to be almost transparent, almost invisible. So I lay it down, and here you'll see what I mean by just the right amount of water in the wrap. I'm laying my methylcellulose down on the Tengujo wet. You see it's really flowing. And it goes on. The video here does not capture it very well, but it goes on wet. There's a sheen, the same as a surface, any wet surface has a sheen to it. And what I want to do is lay it down that way and then allow it to dry, because the paper is dry enough that it's going to absorb that methylcellulose, which is, after all, 99% water by volume. That's going to be absorbed down into the Tengujo paper and then into the centerfold itself, into the comic book wrap. And that's going to give us the best adhesion, and it's also going to give us the best look. It's when you really get that absorption down into the fibers of the Tengujo, into the fibers of the paper, is when you get that invisible repair, or nearly invisible repair. Always lay your glue down in the center of your Japanese paper and work it out toward the edges. This gives you another technique that gives you an invisible repair, because all those little loose fibers at the end get flayed down and spread out thin and transition nicely. Speaking of transitions, I let the methylcellulose dry until that wet sheen was gone before I cover it back up with the Hollytex. Not a lot of pressure with this squeegee, by the way. You don't need a lot of pressure. Just gently drive it over the Hollytex. If you push too hard, you will snag your non-woven polyester fibers, and you'll wreck your Hollytex. So you'll get feedback really quickly. Don't ask me how I know. All right, and now we're ready to dry this page. So you know the drill. This is 2 sheets of paper towel. I'm going to put my repurposed slab of granite over it that I cut and polished from a leftover kitchen remodel. I'm going to change this out after about 20 to 30 minutes. Then I'll change it out after 2 to 3 hours, and then I'll change it out overnight. By then it's ready to go in my cold press. After 24 hours in the cold press, you can see the page turned out beautifully. It's noticeably brighter, it's been deacidified, and an alkaline reserve left in the paper to protect against future acid-catalyzed hydrolysis of the cellulose matrix, and the tear seals we performed are nearly invisible. The staple holes will once again be strong enough to bind the book together once we replace the staples. The inks are still bright. We've had no ink loss, and importantly, no ink bleed. This is the back of the centerfold as you look at the staple prongs. So this repair will be invisible from the centerfold, but careful inspection of the pages immediately before and after the centerfold as you read the comic book will reveal our conservation work. However, to a casual observer, these repairs will be invisible, and that is the goal of our conservation work, to preserve the paper for future generations while being as low impact and unobtrusive as possible to the original paper and printed media. To review, we did 2 small changes to the method I have previously demonstrated on the channel. The first was we started off with a page that spent a few hours in the humidity chamber prior to beginning the wet cleaning process. The second was the way in which we wet the first layer of Hollytex, laid our page out, then wet the top layer of Hollytex and gave the sandwich 10 minutes for everything to be uniformly wetted. The Hollytex assists in getting the aqueous solution in close proximity to the sized paper to enhance water absorption quickly and uniformly in the wrap. This does create some cockling and wrinkling, so we used a plastic squeegee to get the page safely and quickly billiard board flat before beginning our tear seals. The method I showed you today produced as good a result as the previous wet cleaning method I've showed you on the workbench, but in far less time and with less manipulation of the wet paper. Less manipulation means less risk of tears or other damage, and that is a good thing. It produced a great result in about half the time, so this is my new go-to method for table wet cleaning. I think for those without access to a vacuum table, this is about as good as it gets. When you don't want or can't do a full submersion bath for any reason, you can still achieve some remarkable wet cleaning results if you follow this method. I sincerely appreciate you joining me today to continue this conservation project to the first appearance of the reverse flash. What do you think of my improved method for quick wet clean and tear seal on the workbench? Most of the materials I use for conservation are available from Amazon in the affiliate links in the description if you need any of them for your own conservation projects. This was the last of the inner wraps that I needed to clean and mend, so next episode we'll begin the process of reassembling this comic book. If you enjoyed this video, please take a moment to give it a thumbs up, leave me a comment, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Until next time, take care of one another.